So here in Tuttle School, we began to experiment with using social media for learning. We wanted the classroom to look different. Rather than students sitting in rows at tables and have a lecture-style classroom that we all typically see, what if students actually created media as part of their learning experience or whatever the topic may be? For example, if we're talking about a particular social media, learning about a blog, what if one student was running a video camera? What if another one were actually sitting at a computer terminal summarizing what was being said on Facebook? And still another summarizing an even longer summary on a blog. And someone else, or several students, however many, sitting there with their cell phones and tweeting the message in an even shorter, more succinct summary. So we felt we could accommodate more learning styles and have a varied classroom just by the very nature of social media. So there's that aspect, learning looking different. Students really connected with this. They really found it to be fun, and they weren't used to the idea of kids being up and around during a lesson instead of sitting still with their hands folded and being quiet. Could social media, we wondered, actually enhance learning? What if we used blogs to deliver messages we wanted to get to the students rather than the front of the classroom lecture style? So we began to play with this and experiment, and also we really wanted to train students in social media etiquette. We felt the responsibility to create a culture of students who develop respect using social media, respect for the media, respect for one another, who use it in a safe way. And so we really wanted to teach safety. You know, what does a safe user of social media look like? It was amazing what we found in terms of students not having safe behaviors. And then we really wanted to look at productivity. How can we use this to actually be productive? Which was surprising to students. They didn't think there was anything productive about social media initially. What inspired me to use social media for learning is that I've always wanted what I do to be relevant to students. I always wanted, in other words, I want their learning to always be relevant. It's why I evolved from a shop teacher to a full digital lab. Students need to be engaged in meaningful work to be motivated learners. And it's up to me as an instructor to predict, to analyze, and to look at what I feel they need to be equipped with to be successful in their careers and future endeavors. And so I make these ties and I look at them and say, I think they need this. I think this would be important to them. And that's the beginning. Students feel more comfortable with social media. Believe it or not, in the middle school level, they're more conservative and really not as widespread use of social media for learning or other things that one may think or the students might lead you to believe. So they were surprised at how they could be productive with it. Do they use it more? Yes. Do they think about the safety now more? They really do, yes. So they are actually really now, because we have open conversation about etiquette, they do think about what does it look like if you're standing in a circle of people and you ignore your friends to answer your phone, or you're spending time texting when you really ought to be focusing on the person you're with, or you're at a restaurant perhaps. They're really becoming more acutely aware of these particular scenarios, and they're sensitive to it now more so than before. I always learn from my students. So for me to reflect and say, what is it that I learned? I learned that all students have a voice. However, in our normal public school setting, we don't get to hear all students' voices. The social media allowed me to hear the voice of all of my students. And I was surprised at how wonderful a thing that was, to actually hear the voice of students who you deemed as introverted, quiet, and you didn't know even what they sounded like perhaps. To have them articulate the most incredible things in a blog was awe-inspiring to me. I couldn't get over the fact that they just opened up and in text they would communicate, whereas in a classroom setting they would not. Here's something really interesting. In the social media setting, we have an open environment where students are allowed to share. We have parameters that we set on the blog. How do we share respectfully? And encouraging honest sharing. What does it look like to disagree? It's okay to disagree. And I had that experience with a very intelligent student who really disagreed with the social media aspect. And we sat around and he felt safe enough to share that he thought what I was doing basically was for the birds. I really got depressed about that. I was disappointed, and some kids rallied on with him. It became infectious to some small degree. And as I shared that with colleagues later, they said, "Jay, you're not seeing the whole thing. You created an environment they felt safe enough to share." And they actually expressed themselves, and that's a huge win. Well, here's the long and short of the story. At the end of the experience, this particular student came in a full circle and said, "You know, this is really cool stuff. I really like it." And because I allowed the student to express himself without reacting or responding, just allow it to be, I saw a wonderful thing unfold. I learned that students sharing is ugly, but you must allow it and let it be what it is and allow it to unfold and allow it to grow. It's their way of processing everything they're learning. But now we're seeing them and hearing them process, and it's different, and it requires me to be different. Now, social media is going to change potentially the way students learn, but there's a huge responsibility for educators to accept and integrate these powerful and great tools. And that's what concerns me, because you and I know that many educators run from this right now. It's a powerful tool. It will eventually replace desktop computers. In the next 10 years, we will see these small handheld devices called smartphones outperform desktops in terms of what students need. That will happen. It's just a fact. Will we continue to push them out of school? Will we continue to close the doors on them? I think our better educators and institutions will say, this is a great resource. It's already paid for. The students are coming into school with it. And they already know how to use it. And so we're going to see education change. I hope what we do see is the classroom change, that they're not putting them away in their backpacks during class. That's the mistake we make. Boy, I just picture students using all of these as tools. Your Facebook and your Twitter and your phones and they're all just tools. And so I picture students gravitating to the tool they feel most comfortable with, the tool that they use all the time. And being in an environment where a teacher says, hey, whatever tool works for you, use it. And I picture students accessing information in the context of their social studies class. I picture them taking video with their smartphones and integrated it into their presentation. I picture students on a field trip tweeting their experience to their blog so that everybody benefits, and really essentially everybody takes the field trip. It's no different than when you and I go on a trip and we Facebook our event play by play by play. Well, that's what students need to be doing with their learning. They need to be tweeting it play by play. So that really, if that's the case, then learning is 24/7, because if it exists in their social media and they're constantly wrapped in it, they're constantly learning. Yeah, one of the concerns I have is we never cut this tether of technology from us. We're still human beings and we still have emotional needs. We have, for example, the emotional need to be quiet. We need quiet. We need a time and a space where, as human beings, we can reflect and we can just be in a zone that is quiet. and allows us to reflect. All this technology is eliminating that ability to reflect. I mean, we can reflect and articulate in text, but we need a quiet space. We need a timeout. And so my concern is, how do we become mindful if we're attached to these things 24/7? And we really do talk about that and address mindfulness. And what does that look like? I'm going to side with a professor whose name is Sherry Turkle from MIT Institute of Technology, and Sherry says, you know, these students have drank the Kool-Aid of disbelief and they really feel like they can multitask. And quite honestly, there are studies out and they're becoming pretty specific, and they're saying really outright, we can't multitask. Can the brain evolve eventually and become more of a multitasker? It'll probably happen to some extent, but not to the extent we think. And students really cannot multitask the way they think they can, and we can prove that quite easily, and it has been proven, and it's quite comical to see their response to the fact that they really can't multitask. Take driving and texting, for example. That's just one example, and that's just the way it is. We have to guide them and let them know they really aren't the multitaskers they think they may be. Well, if we just remember that it's just a tool, does it help you do something better? I'll give you an example. My team was out on a shoot at a particular conference. They were the conference and note speakers. During the course of their shoot, they tweeted back to their main station when they were out in the field. They constantly checked back in with their senior editor or field producer who was back in a main building, and the tweets flew around, and they were able to stay in close touch that way. It made them more efficient. So if we constantly remember, a good part of the basis for using these tools is to make us more efficient, is to increase our productivity. Let's not forget that. If it's just to keep us busy, we're going down the wrong road. So how are we using it? Are we achieving the outcome we intended to with this particular technology? Is it improving our performance?